Welcome back to The Lost Tactician, where history's greatest survival strategies meet the unforgiving forces of nature. Today, we're traveling to a coastline where the earth trembles and the ocean rises without warning. Ancient Japan, where for centuries entire villages stood defiant against one of nature's most devastating forces, the tsunami. But here's what makes this story extraordinary. These communities had no concrete seawalls, no early warning satellites, no modern sensors detecting seismic activity thousands of miles away. What they possessed was something far more powerful: generations of accumulated wisdom, ingenious engineering born from necessity, and an unbreakable covenant with the land itself. This is the story of how ancient Japan built a blueprint for survival that modern technology is only now beginning to understand. Picture the Japanese coastline as it existed centuries ago, a landscape of breathtaking beauty shadowed by constant peril. The Pacific Ring of Fire ensured that the ground beneath these communities was never truly still. Earthquakes rattled fishing villages without warning, and when the tremors came from beneath the ocean floor, something far worse followed: walls of water that could consume entire settlements in minutes. The historical record tells us these catastrophic waves struck with terrifying regularity, each one a brutal teacher that either destroyed communities or forced them to adapt. The survivors chose adaptation, and in doing so created engineering marvels that would outlast empires. What made these ancient communities remarkable wasn't just their buildings, it was their relationship with memory itself. They understood that survival demanded more than stone and timber. It required the transmission of knowledge across generations, a cultural immune system against nature's recurring violence. Every elder who recounted the last great wave, every child who learned where the ocean had once reached, became part of a living defense system more reliable than any wall. Scattered along Japan's northeastern coast stand monuments that modern visitors often mistake for simple grave markers or boundary stones. These are the tsunami stones, the tsunami no ishi, and they represent perhaps the most ingenious early warning system ever devised. Carved centuries ago, often in the aftermath of devastating waves, these stones bear stark messages. High dwellings are the peace and harmony of our descendants. Remember the calamity of the great tsunamis. Do not build any homes below this point. Some mark the exact height the water reached during historical disasters, silent sentinels testifying to the ocean's fury. These weren't merely commemorative monuments. They were binding contracts between the dead and the living, geographical commandments enforced not by law, but by collective memory and survival instinct. Communities that honored these stones prospered. Those that forgot, or whose memories grew complacent with peaceful decades, paid the ultimate price when the ocean returned. The stones transformed disaster into data, death into defense, ensuring that each catastrophe would protect future generations, rather than being forgotten in the comfortable haze of safe years. The architectural genius of ancient Japanese tsunami defense lay in a profound understanding. You cannot defeat the ocean, but you can refuse to stand where it strikes hardest. Villages were positioned with obsessive care, nestled into valleys that channeled water away from homes or elevated on natural ridges and artificial mounds called takadono. Critical structures, temples, shrines, community centers, occupied the highest ground, serving dual purposes as spiritual centers and emergency refuges. When the warning came, whether from the sudden retreat of the tide or the violent shaking that preceded the wave, every resident knew exactly where to run. The buildings themselves embodied flexibility over rigidity. Timber construction, with sophisticated joinery, allowed structures to absorb and dissipate energy rather than shattering under pressure. Elevated foundations lifted living spaces above ground level, creating buffer zones that could flood without destroying homes. terraced agricultural fields marched up hillsides in careful steps, each level slowing water's advance, each platform offering another tier of safety. This wasn't random construction, it was warfare against water, fought with patience and topography. Perhaps most ingeniously, communities cultivated coastal forests as living barriers. Dense plantations of pine and other resilient trees formed natural ramparts, their interlocking root systems anchoring soil, while their trunks absorbed wave energy and trapped deadly debris. These forests required generations to mature, representing investments in protection that wouldn't pay dividends for decades. Yet communities planted them anyway, understanding that true security demanded thinking beyond a single lifetime. March 2011 brought a terrible validation of ancient wisdom. When the Tohoku earthquake unleashed a tsunami of unprecedented modern scale, Japan's massive concrete sea-walls, some over 10 meters high, monuments to engineering confidence, crumbled or were simply overwhelmed. Yet in scattered communities that had preserved ancient practices, that had built above the tsunami stones and maintained their protective forests, survival rates astonished rescue teams. The lesson was stark. Technology without wisdom is merely expensive failure waiting to happen. Ancient Japan's tsunami defenses teach us that true resilience emerges from humility, acknowledging nature's power while refusing to surrender to it. These communities survived not through dominance but through adaptation, not by fighting the ocean but by understanding it intimately enough to avoid its deadliest blows. Their methods combined engineering, ecology, memory, and community into a defensive matrix that protected lives across centuries. In our age of climate uncertainty and rising seas, these ancient strategies deserve resurrection. They remind us that the most sustainable solutions often lie not in newer technology, but in older wisdom waiting to be rediscovered. If this deep dive into survival through the ages resonated with you, hit that like button. Share this with someone who appreciates how history teaches us to endure, and subscribe to The Lost Tactician. We're building a community that understands the past isn't just behind us, it's the foundation we stand on when the next wave comes.